Over 60. Discover the 4 incredible carbs you must eat and the 4 hidden dangers you should avoid. Harold stared at the bright screen, words swirling before him like a frantic storm. Incredible carbs? He echoed aloud, more skeptically than anything else. 11 years of teaching history had ingrained a cautious mind. How had something once benign, a simple list of foods, transformed into a minefield of pressure? He rubbed his tired eyes as images of the hospital flashbacks darted through his mind, blood pressure numbers peaking ominously, urging him to change. Now, ideas of diets and nutritional complexities settled like a brick in his stomach. The contradictions thudded against his conscience. He had been the champion of family meals, loved the laughter over cookie batches during faculty meetings, yet now his health was saying no to all the comforting flavors. Each crisp article he read screamed with urgency, warning of unseen dangers in the aisle he used to roam without a care. The bold promises tantalized him, even as the anxiety tightened its grip on his chest. With each click, confidence eroded. He felt more like an outsider in his own kitchen. Was zucchini really better than Grandma's famous coleslaw? A late afternoon stroll to the farmer's market might clear his head, although it now felt like a battle. As a sunbeam danced around him, he sought solace among the colorful stalls, but the air buzzed with laughter and chatter, and it stung. Here were those carefree people, indulging in playful debates about the best summer recipes, and he was fighting against an invisible barrier of expectations. That's when he locked eyes with Mia. "You must be Harold. I've heard so much about you." Her enthusiasm brightened the drab market. As they exchanged awkward pleasantries, she unwound the threads of fear when she spoke about food and health. Mia described her mission to empower seniors, illuminating the vitality that carbs could offer versus the dangers that heavily processed items posed. They plopped down at the cafe, and she shared her 4 incredible carbs: quinoa, sweet potatoes, lentils, and brown rice. Yet as the conversation deepened, Harold's heart raced with each delightful suggestion. "Less sugar," she counseled gently, "and trade out white flour where you can." His mind echoed back to shared treats in the teacher's lounge, guilt bubbling beneath the surface. He could already hear them questioning while glancing at the zucchini bread he might bring to the potluck. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from.
I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Harold felt the weight of his indecision pressing down on him, the potluck invitation gnawing at his mind. That beloved coleslaw echoed with familiarity, its creamy texture comforting like a hug from an old friend. But would it resonate with the new, healthier Harold he was trying to embrace? He envisioned his peers, still clinging to the old ways, and the shame that pooled in his stomach tightened. He glanced at Mia, who smiled encouragingly, yet he felt like she was watching him through a magnifying glass, dissecting every move he made. As colleagues laughed, nostalgic scents swirled around him, and he trembled upon realizing this choice transcended a mere dish. It was a confrontation of values, a rebirth challenge he wasn't sure he was ready for. When the moment arrived to show his creation, he became painfully aware that this was more than a recipe. It was the balance of integrity and self-acceptance on the pedestal of age. What would he choose to serve? Not just to his friends, but to the reflection staring back from the mirror. Harold awoke the next morning, the potluck looming uncomfortably in his mind like an uninvited guest. The early light poured into the kitchen, illuminating the countertops where the remnants of his culinary experiments lay. A half-open bag of quinoa sat beside a neglected sweet potato, and a stack of cookbooks loomed as silent witnesses to his silent conflict. He felt the burden of possibility pressing against him. It was a stark contrast to the mindless routine of his past, where he could whip together meals without a second thought. The thought of embracing change echoed in his head. Was he willing to march forward into this new territory? Pushing past doubt, he threw himself into his thoughts, analyzing the essence of each food before him. Yes, he wanted to live healthier, but each item danced on the brink of his nostalgia and emotion. Quinoa was a discovery, yet it felt like a betrayal to the dinners spent sharing rich flavors of family recipes. Harold took one last swig of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table, the room quiet save for the distant hum of a passing car. It was time for reflection. He needed a plan, perhaps something transformative to shake up the comfort zone he had built around himself. What if he could create a dish that blended the old with the new? Perhaps he could reinterpret the coleslaw, or even better, merge it with the sweetness of sweet potatoes. With each chop and stir, he recorded every thought, as though journaling his process. He noted the blend of savory and sweet could be just the bridge to connect his past with the present. What he'd serve wasn't merely about health. It might symbolize his courage to redefine himself. He wondered if people around him, his peers, would even care. It was terrifying to think how they might view his attempt, his twist on something they all once cherished.
As he whisked the dressing, Harold experienced a revelation. He had cultivated a knack for experimentation he never thought he possessed. It dawned on him that he could be both the teacher and the student in this culinary classroom of life. Exploring these carbs not only meant revamping his diet, but also challenging the rigid expectations of who he was. Each new recipe was a lesson in identity, a small step away from self-doubt. Mia would be there at the potluck, advocating for her ideas. The growing list of carbs in his mind felt almost palpable, buoyed by a mission he now wanted to share. Perhaps he could be the version of himself that embraces change without losing the comfort of what he loved. As the hours melted away, Harold plated his creation with care, filled with vibrant colors and fresh aromas. The taste test loomed large. Was it enough to quell his insecurities? He could envision the reactions, some supportive, some skeptical. The bittersweet anticipation danced in his gut. The decision crystallized now. He wasn't just cooking a dish, but rather crafting a statement about who he was becoming. Yet, as he looked in the mirror for one final glance and adjustment, a gnawing fear returned. The day ahead held uncertainty. Would he stand firm when faced with resistance, or would he crumble under the weight of old expectations? The drive to the potluck was lengthy, filled with rehearsed speeches converging in his mind. He knew the truth was simple. He was a work in progress, and the time had now come to face them, not just to serve a meal, but to serve notice. How they would take it remained a question teetering at the edge of his resolve. Would he have the strength to share his journey, or would the voice of doubt drown out the sound of enthusiasm? The parking lot was buzzing with laughter and conversation, an unexpected symphony of the everyday, yet it felt like a distant echo to Harold, who stood at the entrance weighing the enormity of the moment. As he clutched the dish, a vibrant, unconventional blend of sweet potatoes and coleslaw, he felt the weight of every expectation he had ever faced pressing down upon him. Each step toward the gathering felt monumental, a gradual unveiling of his intentions. The sun hung overhead, casting a warm haze that wrapped him, and with each stride he found urgency blooming within him, a clash of excitement and unease. As Harold stepped into the main area, where food was already sprawled across tables, the fusion of scents pulled at his senses. Familiar aromas of comfort food stirred nostalgia, almost coaxing him back into the safe familiarity of beloved recipes. But he pressed forward, refused to be swayed. Mia spotted him first, her bright smile slicing through his reservations. "Hey, Harold, what did you bring?" she queried, her voice cheery and inviting, momentarily easing his tension. "This," he replied, holding out the dish with a tentative pride, "is a sweet potato coleslaw." It's a twist on the old classic. Interest flickered in her eyes. "That sounds amazing," she exclaimed, and suddenly the tentative hope in his gut flickered dangerously close to belief. Yet, as soon as her enthusiasm buoyed him, the shadow of self-doubt returned, whispering insidiously. As they moved to the potluck table, he caught sight of familiar faces, each one a reminder of who he once was. His mother's gooey macaroni, Joe's famous potato salad, and Lucy's chocolate cake were all reminders that the old, comforting patterns were still present. Each moment waged war within him, urging him to retreat to safety. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he thought, grappling with himself. The internal dialogue ignited his anxious energy. Every eye on him could either ignite applause or provoke critique. Harold consciously smoothed the edges of his culinary creation, steadying the tremors of doubt in his palms. If he endured this, would he forge a path to a more authentic existence? As more guests milled around, the conversation slowly veered toward them. "What's in that?" someone asked, poking his carefully crafted dish with curiosity. "Sweet potatoes, cabbage, and a bit of honey dressing," he explained, voice faltering slightly, but he pressed on. "It's healthier than it looks, and retains the spirit of tradition." More intrigue followed. Mia leaned in, her enthusiasm a tether he clung to. "Harold's making culinary art out of health, you all," she proclaimed, inadvertently amplifying the pressure. He felt the tension compressing his chest, a mixture of hope and fear intertwining like strands of spaghetti. As plates began to fill and compliments flowed, Harold watched reactively. He witnessed various expressions shift from curiosity to delight, and within him grew a rippling resolve. Each positive reaction slowly chipped away at the walls he had constructed around himself, dish by dish, interaction by interaction. But doubt lingered still, a ghost tethered to his past. Could acceptance really be sustained?
Yet as he scanned the crowd, something remarkable peered through the clamor, a realization that he wasn't just serving food, he was unveiling himself in vivid new colors. The potluck transformed from a potential battleground into a launching pad. The incremental courage he felt began to take form, analogous to the dish he had prepared, a melding of what had come before and what he aspired to become. As Harold contemplated his next steps amidst the bustling environment, and just as he began to breathe easier, a voice chimed in from afar. "So who's brave enough to try that bizarre coleslaw?" Unease prickled his skin. Would he rise to the occasion or shrink back into the shadow of his apprehensions? The question lingered. All eyes were on him now. The moment had arrived to confront not just the skepticism of others, but the deeper war within himself. Would he step forward to share his journey or retreat into the safety of the familiar?
Harold's thoughts raced even faster than the fluttering of his stomach. The comment dangled in the air like the lingering scent of fried chicken, leaving him poised on the edge of confrontation. As the eyes around him settled on his dish, anticipation flickered. Would they laugh? Would they find it appealing? In this moment, the noise of the gathering faded into an echo, amplifying only the sound of his heartbeat. He could almost feel the air thickening around him, and for an instant he wavered on the brink of retreat. But another glance at Mia, her earnest enthusiasm swirling amidst laughter, ignited a spark deep within. With a steadied inhale, he clutched the bowl tighter, embracing the surge of nerves. Wasn't this what he had been preparing for? A chance to step beyond the shadows of self-doubt and reveal the growth nurtured from his culinary risk. "Bizarre, you say?" he called out with a confidence he did not fully feel. "Let's see if it lives up to its title." The words flowed from him instinctively, a challenge rolled in humor, and the crowd turned into a tide, pushing him further into the spotlight. "Come on, everyone, mystery tastes await." He moved towards the table, two layers of energy intertwining, a surge of defiance against the inner critic, and the pulse of hope that perhaps he could finally shed his insecurities. As he spooned out samples of his dish, he marveled at the radiant expressions on the faces of attendees ready to taste the unconventional. Murmurs of curiosity coursed through the gathering as people curiously approached. "I mean, sweet potatoes and cabbage? Is that really a thing?" Someone hesitated with a smirk, trying to assess the oddity of his dish. "Absolutely. It's the flavor fusion of tradition and health. Just give it a shot," Harold urged, propelled by an unexpected exhilaration. The weariness he had harbored for so long lifted with each bite he served. He watched the guests cautiously sample his creation. A few moments stretched into eternity as he observed their reactions, heart poised on a precipice. The first face, Hannah, who always prided herself on her culinary prowess, chewed thoughtfully, then her brows unfurled in surprise as a smile blossomed. "Wow, this is really good," she exclaimed, a chorus of agreement rippling through the onlookers. Each validation filled him with warmth, bolstering the determination that had begun to escape him. What he had once labeled bizarre felt more like permission to innovate. I saw potential blossoming within that I had buried so long ago, the capacity to create not just food but connection. Yet in the flurry of compliments, his attention fixated on one specific scene, a few guests whispering amongst themselves, peering at him with an expression that proclaimed judgment. The flicker of doubt rushed back. Was his reformulation of a beloved classic merely a facade? What would happen when they peeled back the layers?
His mind spiraled, a need to defend his choices bubbling up with fervor. Just as he was contemplating retreating into a defensive shell, a different thought slashed through the noise. What if he embraced the criticism, stood before them unapologetically? Establishing his narrative could be as vital as sharing his food. "You see, I wanted to challenge the concept of tradition," Harold found himself saying, projecting plainly. "We often revere what is familiar without exploring new avenues. This isn't just food. It mirrors my personal journey of overcoming familiarity and reaching into the unknown." The crowd listened, creating an unexpected silence that felt sacred. As Harold spoke, he navigated through fear, reminding himself that vulnerabilities could breed connections stronger than conventional accolades. To be seen, truly seen, it lit a fire within him. But then came a familiar voice that cut through the moment, laced with skepticism. "And who gave you the right to redefine tradition, Harold? This isn't just about food, it's about identity, my identity." It was Joe, a shadow of competitiveness creeping into his tone. Harold felt smoke swell in his chest, the weight of that challenge hanging heavily over his proposition.
The brewing storm of self-doubt morphed into a confrontation that would demand more than culinary artistry. Now, the time had come to face not only Joe's challenge, but to confront the deeper fear within. Was he truly ready to embrace who he was becoming? Would he unravel the past woven into who he thought he was, or would he shrink back into the comforting embrace of others' expectations? As the silence deepened, Harold sensed a reckoning, a pivotal moment where authenticity had to contend with past allegiances. This was not just a culinary journey, it was about defining his existence. Would he stand his ground, or let the weight of the familiar pull him off course? Harold's pulse raced at Joe's words, electric and charged with a tension that twisted in his gut. Was it really about identity? What right did he have to redefine anyone's tradition, especially Joe's, who had clung to the culinary lineage like a badge of honor? Each word swirled inside him like a tempest, a mixture of frustration, fear, and an ever-growing resolve. Identity is a heavy word, Harold managed, his voice steadier than he felt. But isn't it also fluid? Things evolve, don't they? I'm not trying to erase our heritage. I want to build upon it. He watched how Joe's demeanor shifted, anger bubbling beneath the surface. In Joe's piercing gaze, Harold saw a mirror of his own insecurities reflected back. The question wasn't just about the dish, it was about the weight of legacy. And who better than Joe to symbolize that unyielding attachment? Do you really believe that? Joe shot back, arms crossed defiantly. Or is this just you trying to seek validation? How can you say what you're doing honors tradition?
A wave of defensiveness crashed over him, but past experiences whispered wisdom, the necessity to stand firm, not just for himself, but for the culinary path he was determined to carve. Harold took a step forward, emboldened by the supportive faces in the crowd. This isn't about me seeking validation. It's about exploring what could be. Just because something is familiar doesn't mean it should be set in stone. As his heart thundered, Harold could taste the bitter tang of doubt rising again. What if he was merely grasping at straws? Would his culinary aspirations hold water, or were they no more substantial than air? But then a clearer thought pierced through the noise. This moment was the very essence of food and identity converging. Every dish tells a story, and maybe, just maybe, his narrative could coexist with the traditions he'd been taught to revere. We shouldn't be afraid to explore, Joe. Food is about connection, and it should evolve with us. He noted how the crowd had shifted in their attention, some faces now curious, others contemplative. Maybe they too were reflecting on their own relationships with food, with culture, and with legacy. Unfolding these layers meant they could empathize with his journey. Then a challenge sparked within him, a silent clarion call to reveal not just his creation, but the unmasked version of himself hidden behind years of hesitation. If you want me to respect tradition, let's first acknowledge the beautiful tapestry we're all part of. Food is constantly in flux. It thrives on chaos, and so do we. Joe narrowed his eyes, but Harold caught a flicker of interest amid his skepticism. Are you willing to have that conversation? Harold pressed, readying himself for whatever turmoil was bound to follow. To explore and create with tradition instead of against it? Let's redefine what it means to honor our past, not as an anchor, but as a guide. The air thickened with palpable tension, and Harold held his breath, waiting for Joe's reply, desperately aware that this moment could tip either way. Sensing the tide shift again, he folded his arms, allowing the potent mix of fear and conviction to anchor him. Then a voice from the back piped up. There's more to food than tradition, isn't there? That question hung heavy, a catalyst for others in the group to engage. With every response that followed, Harold felt pieces of himself crumble and reform, a verbal mosaic piecing together an emerging self. It reassured him that the path, from his humble attempts at cooking to the present confrontation, was marked not by failures, but by the relentless search for a deeper truth. And as the discussion unfolded, Harold recognized the profound reality. It wasn't just about the food they shared, it was about the vulnerabilities they bared, and the unity they could create from their differences. But amid the excitement of new connections, a lingering doubt gnawed at him.
Would they allow this revelation to reshape their connections, or would he face the wrath of those too entrenched in tradition to see beyond their own bounds? Clarity settled into the corners of his mind, yet uncertainty festered, driving him to crave further validation. He could almost feel the longing to prove himself grounding him against the raw, swirling energy of past expectations. This crossroads beckoned, an intersection between past perceptions and future aspirations. As the dialogue swirled around him, Harold prepared to face not just Joe, but the whispers of self-doubt that had plagued him for years. Standing there, he understood that the real test was just beginning. A true measure of his mettle awaited him. Would he rise to meet the challenge, or would he slip back into the shadows, afraid of losing what little security he had? The air crackled with anticipation, a promise that the next moment could change everything. Could he break free of the shackles of conformity and fully embrace who he was becoming? Harold remained poised, his heart racing as he awaited Joe's response. But suddenly a voice cut through the noise, shattering the moment of fragile anticipation. "Tradition is a shield, Joe. We don't have to carry it alone." The speaker was unfamiliar, yet their truth resonated with Harold like a tuning fork struck just right. As he gauged the crowd's reaction to this new thought, a mix of surprise and understanding danced across their faces. Each flicker of realization, each nod, felt like a tentative step toward collective exploration. Could this be the beginning of the liberation Harold yearned for? Could words alone truly break the vice grip of an inherited culinary doctrine? With a deep inhale, Harold seized the moment. Right, we can engage tradition without letting it bind us. What if we let our experiences, the chaos, the breakthroughs, influence what we create? This time the crowd murmured, exchanging glances, some captivated by his fervor, others still steeped in skepticism. Harold's stomach churned, but he pressed on, diving deeper into his conviction. The flavors that define our past don't need to be locked in a vault. Let's allow them to inform, not limit us. Joe remained stoic, the tension radiating from him palpable, but there was a spark of contemplation in his eyes, a small crack in the fortress of his beliefs. Encouraged by the shift, Harold searched for a personal connection, a common thread. I felt the weight of expectations too. My first dish, burnt to a crisp, felt like failure, but by embracing that moment, I discovered the joy of experimentation. He found himself recounting tales of culinary misadventures, a subtle smile spreading as laughter erupted from the crowd. It softened the air, the tension giving way to an unexpected camaraderie. If we only stick to what's known, we miss out on everything that could be. That's where true creativity lies, in daring to fail and learn.
The welcoming atmosphere buoyed Harold's confidence, but the weight of his impending confrontation with Joe loomed like a storm cloud. He couldn't ignore the gravitational pull of tradition tugging at his thoughts, each tug revealing a hidden layer of doubt. Was he really equipped to champion this new culinary understanding? Before he could spiral into overthinking, he turned his focus to Joe, whose expression remained largely unreadable. "Let's step into the unknown together, Joe," Harold appealed, his voice steadier. "You've got the expertise and the history. Show me how to honor that while we explore new dimensions." As he offered this olive branch, Harold felt the energetic exchange shift, everyone holding their breath as they awaited Joe's reaction. He was aware this was more than a question of cuisine. It was an invitation for Joe to navigate vulnerability and explore growth, not just for Harold, but for himself. The scene felt electric, hovering between the anticipation of transformation and the risk of confrontation. Joe's face changed slowly, doubt flickering and fading as the momentum built around them fed into something larger, an emerging narrative of resilience and reinvention. "Fine," Joe finally said, his arms unfolding ever so slightly. "But it's not just a playground. Respect is earned." There it was, a crack in the wall, a bridge constructed from acknowledgement and respect. Yet the weight of his words hinted at potential strife lurking just beneath the surface. Feeling a rush of both triumph and trepidation, Harold realized he had taken a crucial step forward. But a new question loomed. What sacrifices would it take to sustain this newfound partnership? And could he maintain his identity while blending the traditional with the innovative? The stakes had transformed, and with them, the tension sharpened as the next chapter of his culinary journey unfolded. The horizon glimmered tantalizingly ahead, but uncertainty shrouded it with still unanswered questions. Harold was poised not only to reshape his culinary identity, but also to navigate the murky waters of collaboration, a feat far more daunting than cooking alone. And as the crowd's energy surged around him, Harold understood he was on the cusp of something monumental, the pressure rising, a challenge yet to be defined.
Would his attempts to honor tradition while forging a new path ignite a beacon of inspiration, or would they plunge him deeper into the depths of culinary doubt? Harold barely noticed the applause that followed Joe's reluctant agreement. His mind was spinning, caught in a whirlwind of excitement and anxiety. What had he just unwittingly signed up for? The thrill of potential reinvention was rapidly met with the reality of uncertainty. He knew that Joe's acceptance came with conditions: respect, balance, and the looming specter of tradition would guide their next steps.
As the crowd began to disperse, Harold felt the weight of expectation settle over him like a heavy cloak. He stepped away from the immediate buzz of the crowd, seeking a moment of solitude to discern his next move. His heart hammered in his chest, and he could feel the adrenaline rushing through his veins. Was he ready to blend what he loved with what he revered? The moment alone allowed Harold to gather his thoughts. He reflected on his conversation with Joe. It was a vital turning point, yet it also stirred a deeper conflict within him. He had cravings for culinary innovation, but how could he create without losing himself in the process? Doubts swirled as he envisioned his next dish: methodical precision, traditional techniques, or daring experimentation that would elevate his artistry. The dichotomy laid itself bare in stark contrast, the rigid framework of time-honored recipes against the unfettered creativity that ignited his passion. He sat at a bistro table, staring at the empty plate before him, the familiar scent of spices wafting past his senses. Then it hit him, a realization so clear it buoyed his spirit. Perhaps the answer lay not in battling the past, but in coexistence. How can tradition inform an innovative approach? The brightness of the culinary inventions he adored didn't need to eclipse the elegance of tried and true methods. Armed with vibrant images of fusion dishes dancing in his mind, he took a deep breath, feeling the simmering potential bubble in his chest. A plan began to emerge, one that would take both himself and Joe into uncharted territory. He would create a dish that honored his heritage while layering it with elements of his own culinary evolution, something that celebrated the past but was unmistakably shaped by personal experience and exploration. He envisioned roast pork enveloped in a tangy citrus glaze inspired by his grandmother's teachings, but with an unexpected twist, a delicate infusion of spices from far-flung regions, and homage to the multicultural aspects of modern gastronomy. Yet the thrill of creation was tempered with a sense of dread. Would Joe see the value in this new direction? Would he respect the risks Harold was willing to take? More than that, would the audience accept this dish as a worthy tribute rather than a betrayal? Harold couldn't shake the feeling that this partnership, new as it was, could either be a lifeline or an anchor dragging him down. The stakes felt cruelly high. He was no longer just wrestling with his own fears, but on the precipice of a significant collaboration. Still, each flicker of doubt was met by a flicker of resolve. He would invite Joe, not just to critique, but to engage, to evolve together in this journey of fused flavors. The intrepid chef, always caught in the balance between fear of failure and desire for evolution, stared back at him from within, and he found himself prepared to defy the barriers that threatened to impose themselves on his artistry. As he gathered his things, a surge of determination flowed through him. He stepped away from the bistro. Change was budding, and collaboration loomed large. But the question remained: could he persuade Joe to embrace a partnership built on trust, creativity, and respect? A blend of hard-earned tradition and liberating innovation awaited them, but only if he could navigate Joe's expectations without losing his own identity. And as he strode forward, the simmering concoction of doubt and ambition managed to morph into a palpable sense of urgency. What would their first collaborative dish reveal? Would they forge a path to culinary freedom, or would the weight of expectation suffocate their vision? The air was thick with anticipation as Harold flipped through the dog-eared pages of his grandmother's recipe book, the familiar faded ink offering a sense of comfort. Each recipe held a memory, a whiff of nostalgia, but he was ready to transmute those memories into something fresh and daring. He needed to preserve the essence of her teachings while interweaving the innovative spirit burning inside him. A morning sun streamed through his kitchen window, casting a warm glow over his workspace, and for the first time in days, Harold felt a surge of clarity. It was not simply about reinterpreting his heritage. It was about starting a dialogue with the past, one that would allow him to carve out a new identity for himself as a chef. The voice of his grandmother echoed in his mind. To cook is to tell a story. Now he was determined to narrate a tale that melded history with adventure. With newfound focus, he began gathering ingredients. The vibrant citrus fruits reminded him of the summers he spent in her backyard. He meticulously chose spices that had become the backbone of his culinary identity: cumin, coriander, and a hint of cardamom. As he arranged the vibrant array before him, I envisioned the layers developing in complexity, echoing the many layers of himself. Every selection felt like an act of rebellion against complacency. Yet for every spark of inspiration, doubt crept back in. What if Joe dismissed this dish as fusion gone wrong? Tradition, after all, was a fortress. Harold sat below its walls, trying to find a way in without a battering ram. But questions were a part of the creative process. He needed to invite Joe into this conversation. With courage, he picked up his phone and texted Joe. "Can we talk through the dish later? I have an idea I think we should explore together." The uncertainty of Joe's response curled in his stomach. Would his mentor embrace the change or see it as a threat? The dynamics of their relationship began to unfold in his mind. Joe, tethered to his classical roots, could be rigid at times, yet the layers of his own career echoed the challenges Harold faced. Perhaps they were not so different after all.
When Joe responded, the swift, "Sure, let's meet," felt like a small lifeline thrown into the stormy waters of his self-doubt. Over the next few hours, Harold paced the kitchen, revisiting preparatory steps, analyzing each move. Would they create harmony together, or would styles clash, leaving only frustration in their wake? As the day turned to dusk and shadows began to stretch in the fading light, Harold set up a tasting session. He plated his creation, the roast pork enveloped in that tangy citrus glaze, with the ethereal spices woven through. It was a bold statement of integration, a reflection of his journey toward finding balance. With the dish ready and nerves racing, he wondered if it would resonate with Joe. Would he see Harold's ambition to bridge past and present, or would the chef adhere to convention, rejecting the impulse for cross-cultural creators? As he set the table for their meeting, unrelenting tension gripped him. The moment Joe arrived, his expression provided no clues. They exchanged pleasantries, and the initial taste loomed over them both, a precipice marking the trial of Harold's evolution as a chef. "Let's see what you've created," Joe said, leaning in, skepticism mingled with curiosity. What awaited Harold in this moment could either solidify his vision or unravel it completely. With a steadying breath, he thought, perhaps change was not only necessary, but inevitable. As he placed the plate before Joe, he realized the stakes had never been higher. Would the flavors harmonize into a culinary breakthrough, or would they clash, revealing the cracks in their budding partnership? The taste of the moment hung heavy in the air, teetering on the edge of revelation. As Harold watched Joe take his first bite, time seemed to stretch into an unbearable silence. Every muscle in Harold's body tensed as he read the subtle cues in Joe's expression. The first taste, the moment that would either launch Harold into the stratosphere of culinary creativity or dash him to the ground in the agony of rejection. Joe chewed slowly, his brow furrowing slightly as he considered the complexities of the dish. The balance of flavors was an intricate dance, the citrus brightness mingling with the earthiness of the spices, and Harold's heart raced, desperate for validation. Each moment felt like an eternity. Doubt wove itself through his thoughts, speculating if the dish had gone too far beyond tradition, or if it was somehow flavorsome enough to be respected. "Interesting," Joe finally said, setting his fork down and leaning back. The skepticism in his voice was laced with genuine curiosity. It felt like stepping off a cliff, uncertain of what lay below. "You're blending themes here that could alienate many traditionalists." But he hesitated, the unspoken thoughts hanging in the air. "But you pull it off with finesse." A flicker of hope ignited in Harold's chest, battling against the shadows of self-doubt. "You think so?" he asked, searching for guidance in Joe's eyes. "I'm intrigued," Joe replied, a small smile beginning to break through. "But it needs refinement. You're on the right track, but there's a call to tradition that you need to respect." The words both soothed and unsettled Harold. On one hand, he craved approval. On the other hand, the potential for being cast back into the world of rigid convention loomed ominously. "What do you mean? Should I tone down the spices? Simplify the flavors?" Each suggestion that danced in his mind felt like it threatened the essence of what he sought to create. "Not exactly," Joe said, choosing his words carefully. "I think you need a deeper understanding of why those traditional flavors work together before reinventing them. It's about knowing the rules to break them effectively." Harold's thoughts raced. This could be the moment of revelation, not just for his dish, but for his entire approach as a chef. "So you're suggesting I learn more about the traditional recipes? Understand the nuances?" "Precisely. Immerse yourself in the old ways," Joe encouraged.
Channel that knowledge into your innovations. Know the stories behind ingredients and culinary methods before you narrate your own. It builds authenticity, and authenticity builds trust. The clarity began to wash over Harold, the tension now transforming into determination. He had been so focused on his own narrative that he hadn't fully grasped the broader context, the rich tapestry of culinary history waiting to be acknowledged. "I see what you mean," he admitted, excitement igniting within him. "So the challenge is for me to dive deeper into the past to find my own narrative thread." "Bingo. You still have it in you, but the story is incomplete," Joe replied, a glimmer of admiration in his eyes. "I want to help you navigate this. Spend some time with the classics. Come back when you've absorbed the essence. We can then create a dish that honors the past while establishing your new voice." With that prospect planted like a seed in his mind, Harold felt a renewed purpose. He would not only dive into culinary history, but also challenge himself in ways he had never imagined. The tension strumming through him shifted into a motivational pulse, invigorating his quest for culinary excellence. As they moved on to other discussions, Harold's thoughts whirled with the potential ahead. The task at hand was daunting, yet he could feel the contours of his identity beginning to sharpen and define themselves. But as he left the kitchen that evening, one question loomed larger than before. What if, in the depths of tradition, he discovered something about himself that he had long buried, something that could shatter the very foundation of who he thought he was as a chef? The answer gnawed at him, dancing just out of reach, and he knew that it would unveil itself soon enough. Days turned into weeks, and Harold dove headfirst into the realm of culinary history.
He began with his grandmother's old recipes, meticulously analyzing every step, every flavor profile, and the stories woven into each dish. He spent hours at the local library, researching classic cooking techniques and diverse culinary traditions. The more he immersed himself, the more he began to understand the powerful nexus between heritage and innovation. As he familiarized himself with the intricacies of traditional recipes, something remarkable occurred. Harold found inspiration in the stories each dish told, a celebration of family, culture, and history that transcended time. He recognized that every ingredient carried a narrative, echoing through generations. Amidst his newfound understanding, confidence began to crystallize. Cooking transformed into an exploration of identity, bridging what had come before with what he aspired to create. With renewed resolve, he experimented in his kitchen, this time with a more profound respect for traditional elements. He revisited the sweet potato coleslaw, allowing memories of family gatherings and laughter to infuse his dishes with emotion, while balancing them with innovative techniques. Slowly, his palate adjusted. He learned to appreciate the alchemy of flavors rather than merely altering them. During this time, Harold forged a deeper friendship with Joe, who became a mentor, guiding him through nuanced discussions around culinary storytelling. They began collaborating on a new dish, one that interwove Harold's vibrant visions with Joe's cherished traditions. The idea of roast pork emerged again, but this time with infused spices that echoed the traditional preparatory methods, layered with fresh elements reflecting Harold's journey. Finally, the day arrived when they would present their creation at a community event designed to showcase local talents. As Harold plated the roast pork, now adorned with a citrus spice glaze and complemented by his grandmother's beloved sweet potato coleslaw, he felt a deep sense of pride. This dish carried not only flavors, but also the lessons learned throughout his transformative journey. As guests gathered, anticipation buzzed in the air. Many familiar faces, including those who had once doubted his culinary ambitions, approached with curiosity. Harold felt steadied by an internal quiet. The resolute confidence in what he had accomplished filled him with a sense of belonging. When it was time to present, Harold inhaled deeply and spoke passionately about his dish. He shared how each element represented a balance between tradition and innovation, a tribute to his roots while celebrating the future. Oliver, who organized the event, beamed with enthusiasm, showcasing Harold's dish to the crowd. Eager faces leaned in, intrigued by the flavors and the stories behind them. As people tasted the dish, their expressions morphed into whispers of delight. Laughter erupted from familiar voices, mingling with enthusiastic compliments. Harold watched the gathering engulf his creation, realizing this moment was more than the food itself. It was the convergence of growth, understanding, and a new vibrant identity. Reflecting on the swirl of conversations and laughter surrounding him, Harold felt the weight of his past shedding like an old garment. He had not just created a dish, he had rekindled connections with his heritage while stepping into a new, vibrant culinary identity. The applause that followed became a rhythmic affirmation of his journey, validating his courage to confront both criticism and self-doubt. As he looked at Joe, who shared a proud smile, Harold experienced a profound sense of acceptance, not just from the audience, but from himself. He had ventured through uncertainty, transformed fear into creativity, and rooted his identity firmly in the blend of past and present. In that moment, he understood that embracing tradition did not mean suffocating originality. Instead, it allowed for expansion, exploration, and true artistry. This epiphany resonated deeply within him as he realized his personal journey was expanding beyond the kitchen into every aspect of his life. He had become a chef who could confidently navigate the currents of culinary arts while embracing the intricate tapestry of history. Harold no longer simply labeled himself as a teacher, but as a creator, a storyteller, and most importantly, someone who embraced both his past and future unflinchingly. Departing from the event, pride coursed through him. This was not just a sunset of achievement, it was a dawn of a life rich with possibilities and potential. Harold knew he was ready to continue evolving, fueled by the understanding that even the most traditional routes could flourish with innovation and respect. And in that recognition, he felt his spirit soar. This moment was the culmination of a journey, and here lay the promise of countless new stories to tell through his food. You need to subscribe now to this channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Every click counts. Comment your thoughts and reactions about Harold's transformation and theories on the culinary journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this inspiring conclusion and embrace their own journeys of growth. Don't miss your chance to connect and uplift others through these stories.